In this lesson, I want to share with you the value of spending a little bit of time deciding what it is you want to sketch, from what angle and why. And what we often do is we get so excited when we see a view that's absolutely beautiful, like, for example, this scene of Chichester Cathedral in the south of England. It's not the kind of thing that everyone would be interested in, but it certainly is an iconic bit of architecture. And it would be very easy to feel overwhelmed by what in fact is here in all this information in terms of the actual cathedral itself. Now, if architecture is your field of interest, then you may enjoy zooming in and focusing on the cathedral itself. But my feeling is it makes a much more interesting sketch when we zoom out and we look at the point of interest in terms of its relationship with the other things around it. This is a perfectly nice view here, and it's in relation to, you've got a tree on both sides. When I zoom in and we're looking at all of this, this could make a lovely little study. But in fact, if I learn to look out and see that it's in conjunction with the lawn, it's in conjunction with even some of these fence posts here and some of this vegetation, you suddenly get a sense of the relationship of the cathedral with the beautiful grounds in which it is located. Now, this is an example of where you zoom out even further, and by zooming out I mean, finding an opportunity to walk further back. Some people go with a little viewfinder to get an idea of their scene, and of course you can take photographic references, which is what I've done here, so that the idea is you can do a sketch plein air, and then you can always refer back to your photograph when you come home. In this case, I've gone further back to the point where I've introduced the idea that there is the path here from a compositional point of view, which essentially, a composition is about getting the angle of your story. If you were a journalist, you'd be talking about the angle of your story. Well, having a little path here would possibly even evoke the memory of the fact that you walked together with a friend along this lovely crunchy kind of path, and then you remember enjoying all the flowers, and then you walked towards the cathedral. It just gives a sense of movement when you actually include the idea of a path. Now, you could argue that this shape is rather boring, in which case you might want to move a little bit closer so that you get the idea of this kind of box hedge, so that you have more of a suggestion of the path just being a direction of brush mark in a lighter path colour. So there's lots of scope. In this one, there is less sky, and can you see that when you zoom out of an image, when you decide to go further back and look for opportunities to introduce other elements, suddenly the idea of getting in all the details of that cathedral is not a problem, because you are literally talking about a little vertical and then a little blob. And what's interesting here, in terms of compositional wins, which it's always good to have an idea to look out for those, you've got another vertical here by way of this tree, and that is an example of repetition. And when we do things like put in knowingly things that repeat the idea of something else, that's where design can get rather interesting. Just by the same token, you have almost a repetition of certain shapes here. Not exact, but the eye does like to see certain elements of repetition. Likewise here with these two shrubs or trees. And the absence of loads of sky may not be for everyone, but it's a perfect time of year to do it when the leaves haven't developed fully. And then what you're dealing with is just allowing little pockets of light to come through rather than a huge expanse of sky. It is just food for thought to consider your options, and going up close and taking in lots of detail isn't necessarily the best thing to do, particularly when you don't have lots of time. So I would recommend doing something like this, where you're dealing with your 5 basic shapes in terms of this area is where the tree is. This area, this whole area, you could almost put in 2 shapes here. You've got 1 shape, you've got 2 shapes. That's 2, 3 coming down here, 4 your cathedral, and then 5 your sky. And when you break it down into those few elements, you can then do a very quick sketch. And it can be rather wonderful when you give yourself very little time to just do that. But imagine giving yourself very little time to do a sketch of all of this. It can be done, and I salute anyone who can do it, but invariably it's going to take longer. You're going to need more time, and if you're with a friend, you may not want to hold them up. You just want to grab a quick 5 minutes on a bench and just do a quick rendition of what you see. So it's breaking it down, it's learning to look, it's learning to see that you don't have to make it complicated, and that if we just allow ourselves a bit more space to step away and see what's in relation to the kingpin of the composition, if you like, that you end up with a more fun narrative. So that is Chichester Cathedral. Lovely place. Could be very complicated to paint, but we want to keep it simple.